evening. Good evening. I'm Larry Souter, and welcome to Stories of Amazing Grace. We're coming to you from Bixter Chapel at the Madison Church of Christ in Madison, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us online and being a part of our live audience. Where our theme scripture comes from Romans 8:38 through 39. I am sure that nothing can separate us from God's love, not life or death, not angels or spirits, not the present or the future, and not powers above or powers below. Nothing in all creation can separate us from God's love for us in Christ Jesus our Lord. Well, one of the topics very few of us want to discuss is our eventual death. We'd rather talk about the latest fashion, our dream car, or our favorite sports team. Well, tonight that's going to change. My guest is Chris Neighbours. Chris has over 30 years' experience in the funeral industry and is well qualified to discuss the complexities and some of the pitfalls to avoid when making final arrangements for yourself or for another. God has allowed Chris to follow his passion of serving his fellow man in a way that brings comfort during a very stressful time. And you'll hear his story right after this message.
The whole way to the hospital, I kept saying, let your will be done. Let your will be done. Whatever it is, just let your will be done. Took him out of the ambulance. I just saw his little eyes, and they had an emptiness to them.
That is all of the cards and letters that was delivered from the Madison Church of Christ to me.
It's stuffed.
In jail.
Yeah.
Now, I know we all Church of Christ people, we gonna clutch our pearls. Oh, Lord, she talking about pimps. Look, now this ain't the street pimp, okay? Calm down. This pimp is what I talk about in your prayer of having passion in your prayer. Passion in my prayer, P-I-M-P.
He filled part of this ache of abandonment inside in many, many positive ways. And he was also sexual with me. And I had no idea that that was sexual abuse.
I do not believe in luck or coincidence. I believe in blessings. Luck did not place me in this time of technology. Luck did not give me this brain. He did. Most of all, luck did not give me such a totally awesome savior. He did.
But to watch as a child, friends that are going through the exact same experiences as you, and where you're able to come out on the other side healthy, and they were not as fortunate. That was hard to deal with as a child. It's still hard to deal with as an adult. And so I just am so grateful for my faith and for the faith of my family, because I hurt for those people who don't have that hope.
Please make welcome Chris Neighbours. Come on up. Have a seat. Well, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Yes, sir. Well, funeral director is kind of a mystery profession to me, and I think a lot of other people. Why would you choose that? Or did you choose that from the beginning?
I did. From a sophomore in high school, I wanted to serve some type of way, and this allowed me to serve my fellow man and not make the issue any worse.
Yeah.
Can't get any worse than death. So that took a little stress off. But
did you consider other things at the time?
I did. I considered being an emergency room physician.
Uh-huh.
And just couldn't get past one of the grades. Two, just having to tell people day in, day out, I could not help or save your loved one. And so that would have been very stressful and very feeling inadequate. So I think God opened my eyes to this service project or service industry that I could help in a way and also minister to people to let people know they have hope. Maybe their loved one did not believe, but try to point them in a direction that they could have hope.
Were other people in your family funeral directors or not?
Not a one.
No.
My dad was an electrician. My mom retired from NES. So, and my brother works in scrap metal. So.
And where did you go to school to learn this?
I went to John A. Gupton Mortuary School here in Nashville when it was across from Centennial Park, where Fleming's and all that is now. I got an associate degree in mortuary science, and then had to take a national board test and pass that, and also take a state test, and then serve a practicum or apprenticeship after that.
The hardest part of that was what? Your education at Gupton? Or was it all pretty easy for you?
It was okay. I worked full time as well.
Okay.
Working about 40 hours a week in funeral homes. The hardest part was one semester I had 20 semester hours. And that was chemistry, physiology, anatomy, microbiology, and some other stuff equaled up to about 20 hours in that one semester. So that was my toughest part.
So I just can't imagine, I can see becoming a fireman or electrician or, something else, but the funeral industry just seems, as I said at the beginning, it's just a mystery profession to me. Did you get some people look at you kind of funny in high school, whatever, you were thinking about going into this area? And they say, well, why are you doing that? Or
Yes.
Okay.
They thought I lost my mind, or but I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I don't know if they couldn't grip that. And it's very, the funeral industry and knowledge about that is very, not many people know about, or they don't want to know about.
True.
So, and that's a problem. That's a very much of an issue for families that don't want to know about that, and that's when they make decisions when they're very much stressed out. Death is a very stressful time. A lot of times it's more stressful than going through a divorce or anything like that, because you have to make decisions. If you haven't planned ahead, you got to make decisions that will last forever.
And is it stressful for you as well?
For me personally, it was kind of stressful. When I have lost family members or whatever, it does get kind of stressful, because even though I know what we're going to do, it is stressful to going through losing a loved one and then making decisions on what to do.
Is it more difficult? I'm sure it must be more difficult to plan the arrangements for someone in your family, a loved one, as opposed to someone you don't know, or is that the case?
Well, I compartmentalize.
Okay.
And you have to get through some of the stressful times and through some of the decision making. My mom just passed away last March, and I just run right through it. I mean, I had to compartmentalize. It's not just my mom, but I've got to take care of the situation. So that's what I usually do. And it's kind of odd that people say, well, what do you get out of this? Well, I don't know if it's enjoyment, but satisfaction that I can help someone walk through one of the most stressful times in their life. And then on the other side, they come back to me and say, thank you, Chris, for getting me through that.
Right, I've heard that before. Funerals. Funerals go back to biblical times. Modern day funerals, when did they come about? Is there any history there you could share about funerals?
Back in the, everybody had some sort of ritual or tradition, no matter what age of the 1500s, 1400s, beginning of time. They all had some type of ritual. Back in the Bible, they either put them in a tomb, or they cremated and put their ashes out into a specific part of land. We would call a cemetery these days. So even from back in biblical times, there's always been some type of tradition that how to dispose of our deceased.
Were they always buried?
No, the Vikings cremated. They'd put them on a boat, lighted a fire, and push it out into the ocean. The Hindu, which are mostly Asian Indians, they cremate. They kind of do the same thing. So you have different regions of the world that do different things. Europe cremates a lot. America has just come to that because of the keeping up the earth, taking care of the earth, not taking up space in the earth, cost of things, the way they're going up tremendously, and they're losing to see the value of having some type of service, and that's really disheartening.
Which leads me into what is the importance of having closure? That is important for most families.
It is. It is. You need to have. I mean, it'd be like not having high school graduation, not having a college graduation, sending your children off to college and not having any type of goodbye or anything. Just one day they're here, one day they're gone. You're like, how do I handle this? So it is good to have some type of closure, seeing your deceased loved one, some way, some form, to have that closure. I call it touch, see, feel. And then also celebrating that person's life. Some way, somehow, is to memorialize that individual without just saying, cremating or burying and just not having any type of service. Because the service is not only just for the family, which it is, it's for the other friends as well. They need to be able to say goodbye.
Steps to take when death occurs. That's the overall topic of this discussion. What are the steps to take? And does it vary when a person is either an old person who dies or a young person?
Well, it just depends on the circumstance of death. If they're at a hospital, if you don't have anything planned, you got to start making decisions one right after another of, okay, which funeral establishment are we going to call? What type of service we're going to have? If we're going to do a viewing, what kind of clothes, what kind of music for the service, what kind of flowers, who's going to do the officiating of the service? I mean, all this snowballs, and you got to make all these decisions right now. And one of the times you just lost your wife or lost a loved one, it's really stressful. So I really ask people to, when they come and ask me, you need to at least pre-plan, have this stuff in place, even though your loved ones may not follow it by the letter of the law, but you give them a way to follow.
Does the deceased have the right to say what they want to have happen after they die, or does the spouse or other loved one make that decision?
This is where people just drop their dentures because, literally, because even though, say I did a pre-arrangement, paid for, planned it out to the letter. Uh-huh. If my wife says, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to cremate him, I'm going to pocket the money, she can do that.
Really?
The funeral director has to listen to the next of kin.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
It is right. That's what people freak out about because, but now, that has happened. I've had it happen. But 9.9 times out of 10, the family is going to follow what the loved one has put in place because they want to honor and fulfill their wishes. But you got the greedy folks out there that, well, I can pocket $5,000-$6,000, or the way these funerals are now. I mean, you can go around Nashville and you can walk into a funeral home that sits on a cemetery and you can easily spend $20,000 on a funeral. And who can write a check for $20,000? And a lot of people don't have life insurance these days because they can't afford it. So who's going to be able to write a check for $20,000? That's just for the funeral. So if you don't have cemetery lots, as some people have found out, that's another $10,000 time you buy a lot, opening, closing of the grave, and a marker to go with that. So you're in it for $30,000.
Okay, you brought up price. What's the cheapest we can leave this earth?
Free.
Free?
That is donating your body to science.
If they'll take it.
Well, there's a hospital here that sometimes if they're full or you haven't pre-registered, they won't take you. But there's other places around that funeral homes don't tell you because they want the revenue. But there are places that will take you, and they will come get you. They'll do what they do and cremate the body and then either call you and say, hey, do you want the cremated remains back, or they'll dispose of them. So free is the answer to that. Mm-hmm. Typically, a cremation these days around here anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000, and that's reasonable because they have overhead. You go to some other non-local funeral homes or locally owned funeral homes, and it can be $3,000 to $7,000 for the same thing. It all depends on, if you buy your milk at the convenience store or Aldi or a grocery store. You pay for your convenience and you pay for not doing your homework.
Going back to when someone dies, sometimes they call the police. Is there a precedent for that? Why do they do that or not do that?
Well, if someone passes away not under a doctor's care, or they haven't seen the physician in a while, and they contact the doctor and say, will you sign the death certificate? And they say no, then a police has to get involved, the paramedics have to get involved, and the medical examiner has to get involved. And then that loved one will go to the medical examiner's office because they need to know if it's what they really passed away from. So that can be an issue, and that's more stress to the family. But typically, if you die in an institution like a hospital, nursing home, that type thing, they're already under physician's care, and just the family has to tell the facility which funeral home to call. And I tell people, don't do that blindly. You need to check it. You need to really do your homework ahead of time, because if you call someone and they come pick the body up and take it to their facility, and then when you get there, you get sticker shock, you have the right as a consumer to go to another funeral home, but they also have a right to charge you for the services that you've asked them for, which is the removal and any refrigeration or sheltering. So they have a right to charge you for that. So you could be spending money frivolously, not even thinking. I mean, just by a phone call. I've known some funeral homes around that a phone call could cost you $1,200.
Really?
Just like that, because that's what they charge for the transportation from the place of death to their place of business. So, we shop all day long to save $100 on a refrigerator, but we won't shop or compare to save thousands on some type of funeral.
And we're in a stressful situation. We don't think.
Right. It's kind of like you are traveling and you don't fill up, and you're going across Texas and you don't fill up over in Dallas, and you got to stop at the gas station halfway between there and El Paso, and he's charging you $20 a gallon, and you get mad at him for charging you $20 a gallon. Well, you should be mad at yourself because you didn't plan and prepare for that trip. So people they need to plan. That's my biggest advice to people is you need to plan. Even though if you pre-plan, or if you pre-plan and then fund that planning.
Tell me about the price range of caskets.
Goes on what?
And the types of caskets.
Right. So there's carbon steel, which it goes in 20, 18, and 16 gauge. 20 again being the thinnest, and 16 gauge being the thickest, because the lower the number, the thicker the steel. Then it goes to stainless steel, which is a stamped stainless, but it has enough carbon in it to make the stainless steel soft so they can stamp it. And then it goes to solid copper, then solid bronze. And those are measured in ounces, depending on how much. A 32-ounce copper casket will be 2 pounds of copper per square foot of the casket. Then you have wood. Then that's different species of wood. Poplar is your least expensive. People say, just throw me in a pine box. Well, a pine box now costs you $3,500.
Really?
So it's not necessarily the least expensive way to go. And people tell me that, and I slide the price over for a pine box, and they go, well, maybe Dad don't need a pine box.
Are there cardboard boxes?
Well, you can use what you want to.
Okay.
Yeah, that's up to the family. You can supply your own.
Really?
I've helped a family not too long ago. He's during the pre-arranged stage, and they're going to supply their own, which is fine. That's legal, and so he's getting what he wants, and we have to use it, which is no problem. But the consumers don't realize how much power they have. They're just led around by the funeral director or salesman, so-called, because that's what we are. That's what typical of these funeral homes want you to be, as a salesman. They want to extract as much money from you as possible because that's how they make their living.
The difference between a family funeral home, family run, and a corporate.
Correct.
That's
the difference.
The corporate is looking more to just to sell. I
Correct.
guess.
They're off the numbers. It's typically on what your average is and how much money you're collecting and that type of thing. So a locally owned funeral home, it's kind of like your banker back in the day. It's good to have a relationship with your banker. You still is. You should have some type of relationship with your funeral director. Meaning, not necessarily you go to dinner with them, but their history, typically what they charge, how it kind of operates because you've been to a service there before, that type of thing.
The casket is put in the ground, and it could be $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 or more for this casket, and it has a vault that's put on top of it.
That is a cemetery requirement.
And what is that for?
It's for withhold the weight of the earth, because when they drive a truck or some equipment to dig a grave or whatever, the grave doesn't cave in and sink. Because any casket by itself, I don't care what it's made out of, it's not made to withstand that weight of that earth. So it's going to collapse at some point, either 30 seconds when you fill the grave or later on that day, it's going to cave in. So the outer barrel container, you called it a vault. A vault means it seals, that it seals and airtight. An outer barrel container is an overall umbrella term that covers the vault and what we call a grave liner. A grave liner does not seal, has no type of liner. It's just an exterior made out of concrete or metal, steel, it's made to withhold that weight of the earth. Minimal satisfies the cemetery requirement. Now you go to a country cemetery or something like that, a lot of those are requiring them now because of the upkeep of the cemetery. But back 10, 15 years ago, they wouldn't require it. But now they do.
But the body is going to decompose over time.
No matter what.
No matter what.
No matter what. I can give you a story, but I don't know if I want to share that or if people want to hear that. But if you close up a lot of moisture, what happens? But people would rather do that than have the thought process of outside elements getting into their loved one.
Uh-huh.
So it's a trade-off, I don't want outside elements. They can do that naturally how they want to. It's that we know that's going to happen, but I don't want outside elements getting into their remains.
Are people more concerned about the material body than the spiritual in that regard?
Depends on if you believe in God or not.
In a sense, trying to keep it alive under the ground. It's not alive.
They're trying not to. For the most part, they're just not trying to get outside elements getting into the body. That's their whole point. And they want to keep the body intact as long as possible. I get questioned like that all the time. Well, how long is embalming going to last? Well, I don't know. I mean, I've never taken on that experiment.
Uh-huh.
So I can't answer that question. But I do know when you close up and airtight that much moisture, our bodies are made up of 90-something% water or liquid, so what's going to happen when you seal that up?
Why do they put pillows in caskets?
Comfort. Mentally.
Wow.
That's a lot of people, this bed's so comfortable. Well, how do you know?
Have you crawled into a casket yourself?
I have not, but I've had families do it.
Really?
Yes. And you know one of them.
Have they closed the lid? Just to see?
No, they just wanted to see how comfortable the mattress was.
Sure.
It is a metal, in the old days before it was box springs and coil this and all that with mattresses, it was just metal springs that were attached with a metal frame with a mattress on top, and that was your bed. Well, that's a bed in a casket, is that metal frame, but the mattress is this thin. So it can't be too comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's springy and soft, but they're not going to complain.
That's true. Let's talk about cremation in a minute. I assume that cremation, the body was completely burned up and all you had was ashes, but that's not the case, is it? You have bones left.
Correct. Your your big bones,
Why doesn't the fire consume the bone?
It does. It makes it soft. It burns up most of it except for some of your thicker bones. And it burns it up. It's just, it doesn't burn into an ash. So we have to bring that out of the crematorium, the retort, and put it in a processor to grind that up like a processor at home. That has a blade, and it blends it up into a powder. And then we take that out. But yes, so a cremation is about 1,650 degrees, which is, they tell me, never experienced it, but they tell me it's 2 times hotter than a house fire. It's pretty hot. So that being said, and I've done it many a times, cremate folks, I couldn't imagine feeling that for eternity. I'm sure it's going to be hotter than 1,650 degrees. So.
You're preaching now, aren't you? Preaching.
I'm on my soapbox. Yes, yes. And that's kind of why I do what I do is one, I can walk these people through a very stressful time and kind of point them, without preaching to them, point them in a way they need to better their life.
So after a person is cremated, you're left with, what, a pound or 2 of?
No, a lot more. It's about a...
and what do you do with that? What do they do with it?
Well, you can
what's my options?
You can, the least expensive is to go to somewhere and spread them.
There you go.
That's free. You can take them on a cruise or a place where they like, or Bahamas or whatever, and spread them somewhere. And if anybody would like to do that, I'm more than willing to sacrifice for you to do that, as long as you're paying the way. I'll make sure that happens. You can, I've had them put them in shotgun shells and blast them over a canyon.
Wow.
I was told that. I wasn't present, but the family said that's what they did. They can make them into necklaces, diamonds, compress them, because your body's carbon, and that's all a diamond is carbon. It's compressed over many years into a diamond, but they compress it for a year. I don't know what the time is, but it makes a diamond. You can purchase a permanent place at a cemetery or mausoleum, and you put them in a niche, and have some type of place where you can go and memorialize.
A niche is a little compartment that
compartment. It's kind of like a mausoleum crypt for human remains, but it's a little square for an urn for cremated remains.
And how does the cemetery get ongoing money to keep that?
In the state of Tennessee, they have to place in a trust 20% of that money. So if it costs you $5,000 for that niche, they got to put back $1,000 in the trust to care for that, what they call perpetual care.
I see.
Now, will that run out? Who knows? That's not really their worry, because they're going to be gone by the time that money runs out, and the state takes it over. That's their obligation at that point. The state has to take over the cemetery to keep it up.
And what's the most popular form of storing not storing, but
disposing of the crematorium?
Disposing of the remains.
Free one.
Huh?
The free one.
The free one.
Yeah, spread them.
Oh, really?
Rose garden, Daddy like gardening. He's with the potatoes, or taking a trip and putting them out in the sea. I hear they go to the beach, which is illegal. I'll say that.
Really?
Yeah, there's ordinances anywhere there's a beach. I'm sure there's usually an ordinance that says you cannot spread cremated remains on our beach, or so far out in the ocean, because of course they get washed back onto the beach. But I've heard people do it anyway, in night or whatever. But I just heard that.
How about embalming? Is that required in Tennessee or any state?
There are some states that do that to leave the state, and some do require it. I don't know exactly who, but the state of Tennessee does not require embalming. So you can have a open casket visitation. You can have a funeral and do a burial without embalming, but usually funeral homes have it price structure that with embalming or without embalming, you're going to spend about the same amount of money because they don't want to lose that revenue. So they're going to have some way to capture that revenue.
How long can you keep a body before it decomposes if it's not embalmed?
Depends on the temperature you keep it. The medical examiner usually keeps people for months, and it's 35 degrees, 34, 35 degrees. You can keep them for a while. I mean, I've kept folks in refrigeration for months waiting on family or waiting on them to make a decision or whatever the situation is. So, it can happen.
Hoping I'm getting too morbid here talking about all this, but got a lot of questions. Back to cremation again. Is the body placed in the oven by itself? Is it in a casket, or what is it? How is that accomplished?
It is placed in the retort with a cardboard container. It's really rigid on the bottom, or it has a thin piece of plywood that gives you rigidity. And that's just because to place that body into the crematory, because the crematory is cement, a form of cement and bricks. But the floor is a type of cement, so it's rough, kind of rough. So you're not going to just slide somebody on there like if it's marble or something. So you have to have that rigidity to get that body into that retort. So that's how a body's placed in there. You just put them in that cardboard container, and it's cardboard roller. It looks kind of like a paper towel roller, but it's more dense and longer. Put that on there, and you put the body up there and just roll it in real fast.
Back to embalming again. We're going back and forth here, I know. I'd heard that embalming began during the Civil War, and that to bring the deceased soldiers home, they embalmed them.
Usually with phenol. That was the chemical they had back then.
I see.
Formaldehyde was later developed, but it was usually phenol, and that was just to preserve them to get them back. And usually the phenol is not a great. It's a really strong chemical, and it really it damages the body some, but it preserves. It's a great preservation, and so it will get the body back.
Pitfalls. This is from your notes here. Don't be in a hurry to make decisions, one of them. Avoid emotional spending. That's easy to take place, I guess, when you're meeting with the funeral director. You're under stress and you want to get things accomplished, and they're presenting you with, don't you want your loved one to be in this particular casket?
Right, and I've had people have life insurance and say, when we get to that point, and they go, well, we won't spend all of it. Why? Well, that's what she has it for. Well, and? She didn't say spend it all. She just said, this is an insurance policy or to help pay for my funeral. A lot of people overspend. It's kind of like a vehicle. Every vehicle has four wheels, a tire and an engine, four tires, a steering wheel and an engine, and doors, and any vehicle gets you from A to B. So any casket will get you from A to B. Get you, a casket's a vehicle. Now, what do you want it to look like? What kind of bells and whistles you want? Do you want a plush, soft bed? Do you want a big fluffy pillow? Do you want a drawer to put your stuff in? Your notes that they're going to read later?
Do they have those?
Mm-hmm.
They do. Wow.
And that was a real feature that a manufacturer really pushed. We made a drawer in this where you can put the family's notes and lock it. And
wow.
Well, who's getting in it? And putting it in their hands or putting it with them. What's the selling point on that? Because they're not going to lock it because they're not going to get into it, right? They're not going to read them later. And the casket's closed, so you can't get to the drawer. So, but anyway, it gave the family some mental satisfaction that there's a secure place for little Bobby's picture to go into, and it's there with them. It's not going to go anywhere, I guess. So it gave them and so that's what people, they try to give families a mental security on little things like that. And so, with personalization of a casket or something like that, and that's all good. People can do that and want to do that. It's just if you don't have the money, then why do it? Mm-hmm. Don't overspend. Don't, just like I say, don't emotional spend. I always tell people, bury them like they lived. So if Granddaddy was a multimillionaire, but he lived a simple life, then why would you want to, if he wouldn't buy it, why are you going to buy it for him? Take that extra money and give it to a nonprofit or something that can do good. Give it, make his money, make his legacy live more than going into the ground or going into a crypt.
Some do's and don'ts to say at a funeral. I jotted down some things from the internet. Maybe you can comment on these. Not to say, I know how you feel. You'll get over it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It is good that they died doing what they loved.
So it was good they died. Thank you. Have a good day. I mean, just
God uses all things for good.
Right.
It sounds good.
Sounds good, but if you're on the other side of that.
Yeah. Not to say also, talk about your own loss. You should not be talking about your own loss.
Right. You're not there. You're there for them. You're not there to help yourself or to share your story.
And another not to say, he feels no pain because he's in a better place.
Right. He's in a better place.
I've heard that a lot.
Right.
He's in a better place. She's in a better place. That's a no-no, isn't it?
If you're on the other side, it is. I mean, if you're going to say anything, presence, just your presence there is enough. But if you're going to say anything, share a positive story, share something positive of their loved one. Share a story that you and them had. Something that's pleasant versus, he sure does look good.
Mm-hmm. And one of the do's here is, my name is Chris, and I worked for the deceased for several years. He was a great co-worker and will be greatly missed, is a good thing to say. When you're ready, I'm here for you. But mean it when you say that.
Really mean it, because I've had a lot of families tell me, well, Susie, she told me that she'd just give her a call and she'll do whatever I want her to do or ask her to do. And I called Susie and she couldn't do it.
Should we offer some specific help, like I'll mow your grass whenever?
Yes, be specific, and actually just say that later.
Okay.
Say that later.
Yeah.
Offer that later.
Gotcha.
Because when someone is receiving friends and family, and they don't remember all this, they don't know half the people that walk through the line. And when you're walking through a line, don't share 5 years of your life or whatever with the family. Mm. Say something brief, if you're going to say anything at all, and walk away. Because they have how many other people that want to say something to them or just let them know that they care. So don't come up with a big story.
Have you had some unusual requests for funerals yourself or not?
I have.
Can you share?
Well, some. I was asked, and I did, lay the lady on her side, because that's the best, so she liked sleeping on her side. I did lay on her side. It took some propping up. And I did lay her on her side. And when the funny part about it is we were at the church building and nobody was there. The family was coming, and I had the casket open. She's laying on her side, and the florist comes in. Freaked out. Lightly. He come running. Dropped the paw. It just got him. Dropped the paw. Good. Thank God it didn't hurt it. He didn't break any flowers or anything. But grass. And I'm somewhere, and I heard him screaming. I thought something really happened. I didn't tell him that she was on her side. So he freaked out. He thought she got that way when we transported her to the church.
Oh.
And so I reassured him that
But you did it.
that I did it, and it was a family request, and they're going to be tickled pink. It's okay. Took a little minute for me to convince him of that. He's fine. Okay. So the family was very happy that we could do that for them. So that was that's the first time someone's asked me to put somebody on their side.
Gotcha.
Now they've had me want them positioned other ways, face down, and can't say that right now. But dress them in some clothes that they wouldn't normally wear out somewhere. Then I was a little embarrassed to put on folks. But hey, they asked me, I did the best I could. Dyeing someone's hair.
That's a no-no or what?
For me,
Uh-huh.
I was young. Chris, it's fine. I was all about, whatever I can do, whatever detail I can do to help you, just ask. Well, they did. Slid over a box and said, will you please dye his hair? He would be so embarrassed if people knew he had gray hair. Well, he was 70-something years old. He's got gray hair. Oh, it just, I said, I'm just telling you, I'll try. Oh, it's easy. Just brush it on, rinse it off. It's all good. Okay. Sounds simple, right? It's not simple. His forehead was black. His ears were black. I had this stuff everywhere. And this doesn't erase off. I'm freaking out. I'm 20-something years old, and I got this man half black. It wasn't funny then. I'm sweating bullets. And I called the family. I was like, I've got this man half black. You've got what? I said, I told you I didn't, So anyway, my cosmetology lessons in school kicked in, and it was okay. But I was really sweating it. So from that day on, I've had people ask me to do that, and I said, I can't. I don't care if you take your loved one somewhere else. I cannot dye their hair. That's what hairdressers are for.
Wow.
And they are persistent, and I share that story, and they go, okay, maybe I'll need to spend $100 for a hairdresser. So they see my side of it at that point.
Be ready for some questions or comments. Anthony's going to roam around here in a minute. Open casket or closed casket? Is there
Depends on if I do a good job or not.
whether you dye the hair or not?
Right.
Yeah.
It all depends on, people don't realize it. People's features, their face changes and stuff between what we think they should look like when they show us a picture that they're 20 years younger and they want mama to look like that. Well, that's kind of difficult. And depends on how the person passed away, how long they were sick, that type of thing, because it does change their facial, it changes their body. Your body goes through a change in the dying process. People don't realize that. So they can get upset with you because if they don't look exactly the way this picture was or is.
How about funeral etiquette? Dress, or how should we, what should we wear when we attend a funeral?
Well,
Probably not a red sweater.
yeah, that'd be fine. You're in black.
Okay, black and
You're
red
in
would
black.
be all right.
Be okay. Don't come in Daisy Dukes and flip-flops. Seen that happen. Depends on the socioeconomics of the family, how you should come. This is fine. Casual clothes are good. Some people like to dress up. It's all about showing respect to the family and the loved one. You may not even know the family, but you knew the deceased. And so it's all about showing your respect to them. And so that's why you're really there, is to give them comfort and give them somebody to lean on or know that they're not alone walking through this. So, casual's good. I wait on families. And people know me. A lot of people know me. So, I mean, I've waited on families in blue jeans and slides, or, just I'd be out somewhere and someone pass away and they call me. A lot of people have my cell phone, so they call me and I'm dressed in work clothes. We don't care, just come. So I've done that. But if you're going to a funeral, or visitation, etiquette is dress appropriately, dress nice. Don't go in work clothes and that type of thing. But they would rather have you there, and this is what people have told me. They'd rather have you there, no matter what you look like. If you're coming home from work or whatever, and that's the only time, that's the only availability that you have that day. Because life goes on everywhere else. But they'd rather have you there, how you look, no matter how you look, versus not being there at all. So people do want you to be there to not let them know that they're not alone.
Gotcha.
So.
You get back to cremation. When you cremate someone with a joint replacement, knee, hip, what do you do with the hardware? What do you do with the joint?
Well, we clean it up and sell it.
And get good money for it.
It's an extra revenue stream for us. No. Wow. We do have to dispose of it. We put it in a container, and there's companies that come by and pick it up and dispose of it appropriately.
So do you find that different groups of folks mourn differently during this whole process? White folks, black folks, Hispanic folks, Middle Eastern, do those groups mourn differently or kind of mourn the same during this process?
They do more differently. Asian Indians, they're very solemn. They really don't show a lot of emotion unless that someone has young passed away, and then it's more of a private grieving. Hispanics, that my experience is, they do show emotion. They show their solidarity when they bring food. Their big food is big for them. Black folks, they bring food, but their service is more spiritual. They're more spiritual than white people are in that circumstance, and they show the grief no matter what. No matter what, who's there, it doesn't matter. And then it's just a roll of the dice with white folks. It depends on the circumstance.
Do morticians perform autopsies?
No.
No.
The medical examiner in that area does. But like the medical examiner here in Nashville, they do the autopsies for most counties in the state, except for Memphis. They have their own medical examiner, Knoxville, and that type of thing, the big town, the big cities. So, in the other counties, you usually have coroners. It's usually a funeral director because he has the refrigeration and the equipment to go get a deceased. Some counties have medical examiners, and they send people here to Nashville to get the autopsy done, and they perform it and send the analysis and everything to that medical doctor in that county, and then they take it from there. So it just depends, but medical examiners do the autopsies.
Anybody else?
Hey, Chris, I'm just curious. Do people still go, they take their loved ones back to the home as they did in the olden days and have the service and have everything there at the house? Is that permitted in Tennessee?
You can do what you want. That's what people don't understand. It's the consumer, the family. They can. A lot of people don't have room in their house to hold a casket and that type of thing because the doorways and turns and all that. But yes, that still happens. It's very rare. But I do it mainly in if it's a big house that it was her house or his house for many years, and they just want to bring mom or dad home or whoever home for one last time.
There used to be, and I think there still is, a pet cemetery in Tennessee. Have you arranged any pet funerals?
I don't have license in that.
Oh, you have to have a license for that.
No, I just don't have a license. There's one
You're pulling my leg, aren't you?
There is one in Columbia.
Uh-huh.
And there's one in Mount Juliet. That's close here. So you just call them and they'll dig a grave, and you can take your dog or cat there and buy a marker, and it's like normal, But you don't have to be licensed or anything. You can take your dog there.
I see. Okay.
You can do that.
I can do that. Extra money, huh? Anybody else?
I just wanted to reiterate what you had said about knowing somebody in the funeral business, because Chris was able to help us when my mother passed, and we had her funeral in Illinois, and he was able to communicate for us to that funeral home and saved us a lot of money because he did a lot of shopping for us and communicating directly and with that funeral home director. And he knew the language to speak that we didn't. And he was able to save us a lot of money because of that. And so I just wanted to reiterate the fact that that's really helpful.
You're a good man.
Don't tell anybody.
And going off of what Linda said, Chris has helped me with 3 funerals, and I've basically said to him, you handle this and you tell me what I need to know. And that was so much comfort to me to just let him do that, because I didn't have to worry about those details that he's talked about. He's taken care of those for me, and that is invaluable to me as a family member, to be able to grieve or share with be that time with your loved ones and let somebody else worry about the business part of it and the details. And so he's right about having somebody you can really trust as a funeral director.
And that's part of your mission, isn't it?
It is. It is. To be able to take that load off is
part of your ministry.
To be able to take that load off of a family is really satisfying for me, to be able to carry that load for them. And my family has sacrificed for that, to let me carry out that passion, and carry out that professional.
Because the calls come any time of night.
My phone rings anytime, day or night. And usually my wife, not usually, every time she hears the phone ring before I do. So if I get woke up, they call me at 2 o'clock in the morning, she's awakened as well. And she's awake until I leave. And then when I come back, she usually gets woke up again by me coming in. So, and a lot of times I've missed things for my 2 sons that I couldn't help, serving families. And people don't realize the sacrifice of that typically, because, somebody called right now, I'd be gone and they wouldn't see me until when I got back or whatever. So there is sacrifice to that. It's kind of like being on call as a doctor or being on call anything. If you got to go, you got to go, no matter what's going on in your life. I had to go help a family when her mom we was having visitation for her mom here. I had to leave for a couple hours to go help a family and come back. So, yeah, there's the family has to sacrifice along as well.
We applaud you for that. That's great. Anybody else?
Yep. What happens if someone's at death's door, the family wants to make arrangements but don't know what size casket to buy? What do you do then?
That's he's asking that for a reason. Typically, we wait till the person passes away and then we can do the measuring at that time. But what he's referring to is I had to do that one time and the guy knew exactly what I was doing. So that was a little unnerving. Measuring someone and they knew it and know why I was measuring them. So that was a little unnerving.
Are we measuring around this way or this
just
way?
The widest part. It could be your hips, it could be elbow to elbow, it could be anything. I just need to know the widest part. And will that push in?
I see. One size,
We can leave it
one
there.
size casket doesn't fit all.
It does not fit all. It's not a one size fits all. And we'll just leave it right there.
All right. Thank you, Chris, for sharing tonight. Thank you so much. Well, I want to share some verses from 2 Corinthians chapter 5. This is from the Contemporary English Version. Our bodies are like tents that we live in here on earth, but when these tents are destroyed, we know that God will give us a place to live. These homes will not be buildings someone has made, but they are in heaven and will last forever. These tents we now live in are like a heavy burden, and we groan. But we don't do this just because we want to leave these bodies that will die. It is because we want to change them for bodies that will never die. And that's our hope. Thank you for sharing with us tonight. And I encourage you to share your story with someone this week. And thank you for joining us on Stories of Amazing Grace. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.